Jacqueline West, costume designer on Killers of the Flower Moon. I understand that Leonardo DiCaprio first mentioned this story to you when you were working on The Revenant. So what did he say to you and what was that conversation like?
It was very short. We were shooting a big scene on The Revenant, and he said, "Oh, I just heard about a project that I think that you and Jack would just be great on," meaning Jack Fisk. And I didn't really know anything about it at the time. He didn't really expand on it. But later I had heard that he had gotten the rights with Marty to do this. And when I realized it was going to be Marty, I hadn't worked with Marty before. So I thought, oh, that might have gone away. I was so happy when it came back.
Mhm. Do you know if he recommended you and Jack to Marty?
I know, I think Jack said that Paul Thomas Anderson, because Jack had done There Will Be Blood, had mentioned him to Marty. And I've never worked with PTA, but he, when Leo finally came in for his first fitting in Oklahoma, I said, did you have something to do with this? He said, you came highly recommended.
There you go. See, well, because this was also before the book was released, so I'm assuming you read the book once it was out. So what was the whole research project like before you even got on board? And then you obviously did a lot of research before you even started filming.
Ironically, Monica Haynes, who's my key women's costumer and was on this movie, she's done a lot of movies with me, gave me the book. She also worked on The Revenant with me and different films I've done. And she said, "Oh, this would be such a great film for you to do," and gave me the book way before I ever thought of doing the movie. So yes. And then once Marty Calder read the book again, we were up at our house in Deadwood, South Dakota. And fortunately there's so many incredible Native American libraries. The Carnegie Library in Deadwood has an incredible Native American section, as does Prairie's Edge in Rapid City. And the Rapid City Journal let me into all their archives from the 20s, and they pretty much covered all of the Great Plains, even down to the Osage. So I had fabulous, you know, um, fabulous research photos I could draw on. Plus, the Osage, being the richest per capita people in the world at the time, could afford $1,800 a minute home movies, as probably only the royal family in England could afford. And so they documented their lives. And Marianne Bauer started sending me home movies, and I discovered some online. And Marty has a wonderful producer researcher, Marianne Bauer, who started sending both Jack and me many pieces of research, which we melded into our own. And then Jack and I have shared on 10 movies. So it was a big, it was a big thing, the research for this. For once, I didn't do sketching. I relied all on old black and white photos or screen grabs from home movies or
Wow,
or news footage from the time.
that's fascinating. And I know you also worked with Julie O'Keefe, who was the Osage consultant. So when did she come into the picture? And what was that collaboration like?
I got there in January and started, it was massive builds because the Osage have never really been portrayed in a movie in this very authentic, realistic way. And you don't find those costumes anywhere in a costume house. Or we made everything, and I had to enlist Pendleton to reproduce the blankets from back then, because it's different color palettes now, and the colors were quite different that the Osage tended towards. So I had to get started very early, hit the ground running when I got there. And I think Julie said she first came to our office beginning of March, maybe late February, I can't remember. But she was sent by Chief Standing Bear, and I'd never worked with a consultant before, and she was wonderful. First of all, she loved how the research was organized, how we organized the Osage research, and how intricately how much we had, we had them arranged by traditional, modern and traditional and modern. And then we had all the townspeople, both, the Osage Trading Post, all the people that were coming and going from there, car dealers, the Gray Horse Mercantile was like it was like Harrods in the 80s, right? Or the 70s for the Kuwaiti oil-rich population coming through London. Well, they had their own incredible Harrods. They sold Pierce Arrow cars. They sold, funeral caskets. Tiffany had their own installation. And Julie came in and she was impressed by all the research, but what Julie brought was something unique. Not only did she know the subtleties of, there's 6 ways a woman can wear a blanket, depending what the situation is. And she brought all that subtlety to me. Also, she knew all the best artisans, Osage artisans, even kitchen artists, women who sat and reproduced ribbon work or beadwork in their kitchens that had been, the art had been passed down from their mothers, grandmothers, their aunts. And then she also encouraged all the young women working in our department, Osage women, to bring family photos dating back to that time, stuff you wouldn't necessarily find online, that because they could afford studio photographs and they traveled so much, that they had a lot of tourist photos taken. So I could see how they looked when they traveled or when they really dressed up. It was brilliant what she brought to us. And not only that, it gave, I think, the actors a real sense of security, especially Lily, that Julie was there on hand to really bless, how she was wearing her blanket each day, or, how her Rabanka pins were put on, and just what I kind of made Lily a closet of all the pieces I thought she would have. We made her all in-house, even the wedding coat, but she would go and, ask Lily exactly what you're doing in the scene when she would come back from private rehearsals. Lily would tell her, and then she'd say, okay, I think you should have your blanket folded this way.
It is a great blanket movie, but what you just mentioned about her wedding jacket, it was so striking because I don't know, I guess maybe I was expecting her to just have another blanket for the wedding, but it's this military jacket. So what's the history behind that?
Well, in the early 1800s, Osage Council went to visit Thomas Jefferson, and the United States, it was a peaceful, delegation, and the United States still wanted to show its might. We were still in that mode, and all of his officers, military officers, were there in the room, probably, what would be the Oval Office today. And one of the Osage chiefs noticed the coat and said he admired the coat, right, that one of the generals was wearing. And Jefferson had him take it off and give it to the chief. But the chief was very statuesque. The Osage are really statuesque, magnificent people. They're quite tall. And so this coat was way too small. He brought it home to probably, I'm not sure if they were already in Kansas. I think they might have been in Kansas still, but brought it home and gave it to his daughter. His daughter proceeded to take something that was military and to represent might and turn it into something joyous, and made it her wedding coat, along with a top hat that came from Washington, D.C., which they removed the top and put hackle feathers in and around with French ribbon, decorated the coats with Wabanka pins, ribbon work, put it over blankets with sashes made of Osage finger weaving, and it evolved through the years into this very, very ornate traditional. I know you've seen the pictures of them, but it's
Yeah.
quite, all those skirts all involve ribbon work or embroidery work, woodlands, because they're descendants of the woodland tribes, um, woodland embroidery, woodland beadwork, ribbon work, which is very Osage particular. And as I said, the finger woven belts, and we made them all in house. And Julie brought all the extra pieces that would have to be traditional Osage artwork and look new, not things from trunks, but because it would have been
Yeah.
made new for that wedding. So that's
Yeah.
how it evolved. And then the Osage are quite generous, so they would make several. And sometimes the brides would have to be carried in a blanket because they could hardly walk because they were so generous. These weddings cost $50,000 then, which would be $1 million now. And they would give away all their wedding coats and all the layers to people who helped with the wedding. One chief gave away 9 Chevrolets at a wedding. Wealth was not mentioned on what you had, but what you could give away.
Right. Well, they were all incredible, and just it's just stunning how they just use that and like turn it into something of their own thing. Yeah, for sure. Well, Jacqueline, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Bridges, costume designer on Maestro. You've worked with Bradley Cooper before, but this is the first time with him as a director and a screenwriter in addition to actor. So what was that collaboration like?
It was a great experience. We had worked together on Silver Linings Playbook as well as Licorice Pizza. We happened to be working on Licorice Pizza at the time when he was doing some camera tests for Maestro, some of the prosthetic makeup tests, and he asked me to come on board to start doing the costumes, and so I was able a couple of years before shooting to be able to delve into the well-documented life of Leonard Bernstein and Felicia Bernstein.
Mm-hmm. How much did you know about Leonard Bernstein before this? How familiar were you with him?
I remember he would do the young people's concerts on television when we were children. And of course, I knew his work of On the Town and West Side Story. But as far as his personal life, I didn't know that much about him at all.
Mm-hmm. What kind of research does this entail? Because like you said, like there's the public life, but you're also capturing the private moments between the couple. And I know you obviously also talked to their children as well. So what kind of resource were they?
Yeah, they were amazing resources. I think I started with what's readily available, books that are published about him. We just, in 2018, I think we had his 100th birthday. So there were a lot of publications out at the time that he's well documented on the web. So you're seeing what his public persona was, or certainly a life from the 40s to his death in 1990. And then once we were put in contact with the children and invited to their country house, that's where you really saw where they existed and breathed the air that they breathe, and were able to put together all the pieces, certainly, and was invited to look at in their closet what was left there, certainly clothes that Leonard had after Felicia passed away, and we were able to use one of Felicia's dresses on Carrie and one of Leonard's robes on Bradley, which unfortunately didn't make it to the final cut. But certainly when we were shooting, there was an incredible energy there.
Mm-hmm. Which dress did you use?
It's for this summer dress. It's blue gingham with a large rickrack at the neck and the hem. And Jamie said, "Oh, this is what my mother would wear when she was here in the summers," and she offered us we could use anything we wanted to, and whether I was going to use that actual garment on Carrie, I wanted to have it in case we were going to remake it or something, but it actually went right on Carrie, and it was great to have that energy at that particular moment of those scenes that take a very serious scene that takes place at the country house.
Mm-hmm. Like how many outfits did you want to recreate exactly, or how many did you just kind of want to use off as like a starting point, you know, and put your own twist on it?
You know, I think I only think a couple of Felicia's outfits, or maybe one, and then plus her summer dress, were actually what she would wear. Like she was actually something that I found in research. But most of it was finding out who the character was, and then building something that was appropriate for that character at that time in their life, and what we want to say about them and how they're presenting themselves. You know, Leonard, I actually used a few more things from research for him because he's a very iconic person. You know, you're making decisions on, you see what year it takes place, and then you're looking at the research, and this seems to be his turtleneck period, or you know, it's very famous, his debut at Carnegie Hall in 1943 as a 25-year-old. So why not recreate that image? I mean, it's very famous, and his brother wrote a book, as well as his daughter wrote a book, but his brother wrote a book and recounts what he remembers what Lenny wore to his premiere. So, you know, you're kind of honoring the man and his history and some iconic moments in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, the film covers, I think, 40 years, right?
Yeah, a little more than 40. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I love that the film, like there are no title cards telling you what year it is, or like 12 years later or something, and you get that as the viewer. Just I think later on it's like through the makeup too, but early on it's like through the clothes, like just the different styles of the period. And so how did you go about wanting to communicate that it's a different year now through the fashions of that time?
Yeah, it's always very fascinating to me. You know, I'll watch some classic films and I'll be like, what makes this look like 1937?
Like
You know,
why is this the 50s?
yeah, exactly. Like what hallmarks of that moment in time are here? And then so that's the way I look at when I'm designing a scene. You know, what was in vogue? What was the hem length? What was the shoulder like? Did women wear hats? Did men wear hats? The shape of the trousers. You know, I'm looking for any language of 1943, 1955, 1971. What makes that look like that? And then so I try to be very dead on to tell the story that way visually. And I just did my thing to tell the story as best I could. And, you know, Bradley made the choice of not putting any kind of placards to say what year it is. And hopefully you're on the ride and understand, along with the makeup and the hair changes and things, and that this is a life. This is yet another beat in these two people's life.
Mm-hmm, for sure. It's like caftans, the 70s, you know.
Yeah, there are a lot of language things to use for those that are so specific to each period, whether it's shoulder pads for Felicia in the 40s, or you know, an elegant gown in the 50s, or a very chic dress. You know, you even get down to thinking, where do these people shop? Where do they get their clothes made? You know, who buys their clothes for them? You know, even Bradley did a great piece in the film where he goes, Felicia, I look good because Felicia dresses me. You know, if I was left to myself, I'd be a mess. And you know, we tried to even reflect that, which was true, when after she passes, and his look is a little bold and a little too young for him, But
That's what I was just about to get to, because yeah, after she passes, like he's out of his turtleneck era and he's a little bit more out, and it feels like he's like free of constraints and he's not afraid to be himself too.
that's right. And sometimes, and I love the fact that he would often take missteps with that. I mean, that's something that you notice in the photographic research, and I would want to play up because that is another section of his life.
For sure. Well, one final thing I want to mention is Felicia's like blue-green dress that's used on the poster, and I feel like certain outfits just kind of become synonymous with the film now, and I think that just became associated with the movie now because it was used on the poster, like her back. So what went into that dress?
It is a time in her life where we see her really at the height of her being Mrs. Maestro. And I knew that if she was hostess to a party at her house at the Dakota, she would have something terribly chic. She was a very chic woman. And, that came on. I looked for a prototype dress. I think I found the prototype for that dress at the collection at Western Costume, along with several other things. And I was looking for dresses that had the least amount of seams because, having done Phantom Thread, you see what couture is kind of cleverly done with the least amount of seams, kind of. At least that was my impression of it. And we've tried the shape on Carrie, and it was particularly flattering shape. Part of the key to that dress is the fabric. And we found a wonderful silk wool blend that is still milled right now. And it was a beautiful ice blue. And it worked for sculpting that shape. And it also photographed very well. And so, and she's very elegant in the scenes, and the rest of the guests kind of went off of the feeling of her dress. But this color, using this color would make her stand out in a sea of guests, so
Yeah,
that was part of my plan. And there are happy accidents. I mean, I was doing a scene to show her off and say something about her life, and it ended up capturing the imagination.
For sure. Well, Mark, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Janty Yates and David Crossman, costume designers on Napoleon. You've worked together before on Ridley Scott films. So what was it like reuniting on this project?
It's always fantastic to work with David. I've known him for 100 years, and basically we first worked together in 2001, and I could think of no one better to do the military in any film.
Yeah, David, you're like a military scholar, right?
I wouldn't quite, well, yeah, I wouldn't quite call myself that, but yes, I do a lot of, I've done a lot of military costume over the years. Yes, so when Janty rang me and told me that she was about to do Napoleon, would I like to do it? I of course jumped at the chance, and a huge project, really.
How familiar were either of you with Napoleon before this film?
Only as a person in the street, literally. I'm sure David was a lot more familiar.
I had a sort of working knowledge, but not a really deep knowledge. And as soon as I knew that it was going to happen, then I started looking at it, and in more detail. And it's always the case with these things. Once you start researching them, you just realize how much you don't know about things, and how much we had to know before we started in order to get all the things made, because there were so many different areas to make for the film. So you kind of had to know what you were talking about in order to get the right things produced and the right embroidery done, and you couldn't just kind of throw a big broad kind of thing at it. You had to be more specific and try and work out what the plan was.
So what?
Yeah,
go ahead.
But when we met for the first time, just to have a chat about it, David arrived with fully fledged, beautiful, exquisite research books. I mean, that he'd compiled himself, and already embroidery, beautiful gold bullion embroidery, which he'd obviously got samples, not anything ornate in the uniform department, but he just came fully fledged, fully prepared. And I was going to.
It was so huge. It was a race against time, wasn't it? Because at first we were going to film at the end of the year that we said in 2022, and we were going to film at the end of that year, I think, and we were going to do all of the battles, and everything was, lots of it was going to be done before Christmas, and so it just wasn't much time at all. So we had to anticipate who might be cast, who they might be, what kind of shape these people are going to be, and just get those embroidered coats done.
Right.
Just getting our hands on original items to look at for the kind of patterns and silhouettes, so that you're kind of mass producing the correct silhouette rather than just copying something hanging in a costume house. You're kind of studying it, making your own version of it, and then producing it. So you're getting that kind of authentic silhouette all the way through the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, from the military perspective, there's so many battle sequences in the film, and so many different army regiments too, and they all have different military outfits of different like collars and lapels. So what did you learn about these different designs and what they mean for, like the French, the British, the Russians?
Well, there's so many meanings behind everything. I mean, some countries are easier than others. Russia's one of the easiest ones. The French are quite complicated, becoming more complicated as Napoleon comes to power. So they start off as the Revolutionary Army, so very kind of ragged and very poor. And so we did a lot of weaving of tricolor fabrics and trying to represent the revolution at its kind of height. And then it kind of progresses through the 1790s. Napoleon becomes emperor, the Grand Army is formed, the uniforms get nicer. In real life, generals were going bankrupt, paying for their own uniforms, whereas Napoleon remained relatively simple in his look, as a kind of foil to all these men around him who were just spending endless amounts of money on uniforms.
How many uniforms do you estimate you made? Because there's so many extras, like background soldiers and everything.
3. No, we made about 4,000.
4,000. Oh my gosh.
Around the 4,000 kind of mark, yeah.
Incredible.
So all of that's a worry, because when you make that many things, it comes away from a factory looking very new and very. So all of that has to be processed and go through breakdown, all the gold, all the whites, all the. So it was just logistically, but you wanted to kind of retain the beauty of the period, because we're all looking at these lovely portraits of the time and all these great paintings done by Napoleon's artists around him, and they're almost like reference photos. And so you want some of that to come across rather than just being lots of people. You want some of the character and the.
Yeah, for sure. And you definitely see that with the different people in the armies. So, well, Janty, from your perspective, doing a lot of the non-military stuff, what did your research entail?
Well, we call it civilian. Well, basically, David and I were following each other around France and going to all the same museums, but at different times. And basically, I mean, France was amazing what it offered up. I mean, from just even the military museum there, and then the military museum in Provence, which was spectacular. Fontainebleau, Malmaison, and all the other French museums that were sort of just of the lifestyle and how everything changed so radically, became empire, from corsets to corsets and big hoop skirts, through to this very, very sexy, alluring line, certainly, well, for the men as well as the women, much narrower, much more slender, much more sexual, with the beautiful seam under the bust, no underwear, hardly, just a little shift. I mean, We even went to the Jane Austen Museum in Bath. We went to a local museum, local to where we were prepping. And she was able to show us all the seams of costumes that she'd had, original costumes. And David also got a wonderful selection of originals that he was able to base his looks on.
Interesting. Yeah, it was almost like a fashion revolution, like after
It was a huge fashion revolution, huge. And you know, only now, really, in retrospect, do you realize, you know, throwing off corsets that have been there for years, decades, and just wearing nothing was quite extraordinary. I mean, obviously our crowd was corseted, and it was, you know, we had a mixture. It was more the elite, the upper classes, just generally it was the Empire line only came in really then with them, and then it filtered down, obviously.
Yeah. I want to talk about the coronation outfits of Napoleon and Josephine, just so opulent, ornate, like that long train. It was like fur, white and red. Like, what went into those costumes in the design?
A huge amount of work. With David standing over me with his whip going, we must do it properly. And in fact, we'd had quotes from France, quotes from Spain, because there's still gold bullion embroidery being done because of the, you know, the huge religious following over there. And they were incredibly expensive. And a contact of ours who just had this wonderful man and this family in Pakistan, he would send us photos. They were embroidering, the 13 of them in the family, just embroidering these incredibly enormous trains. And they did it impeccably and so beautifully. It was so exciting when they arrived. But we'd made a lot of prototypes, mainly in paper. And so they, you know, they had foolproof patterns to copy, but they could still have buggered it up. We were lucky they didn't.
Yeah, they were gorgeous, just totally eye-popping. Well, Janty and David, it was great speaking with you guys. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. Ellen Mirojnick, costume designer for Oppenheimer. You've worked with a lot of incredible directors before, but this is your first time with Christopher Nolan. So what was it like working with him?
Working with Chris was just the absolute finest, the best that I could have ever experienced. But I love working with him. He is the consummate director from beginning to end. The expectation, the delivery, the collaboration, his exacting work shooting the film, and frankly, what he shares as the screenwriter as well, what he shares with who he's collaborating with, so that we all feel the essence of the essence and the exactness, frankly, of what he wants to achieve as an end result. He doesn't expect anything from you that he wouldn't do himself. And I mean, it is a total joy. He is an absolute dream to work with.
And he had such a specific vision for this film. Like, I know he wrote the script in first person, and it's, you know, obviously totally from Oppenheimer's perspective. So what kind of notes did he have for you about the wardrobe?
Well, it was very, very specific from the very beginning. There were a few things which I'll tell you about. The first thing was that, given that it was from Oppenheimer's point of view and from his vision, the first note was, no one but Oppenheimer will wear a hat. Now, that is a bit shocking for a period film, and a film that kind of, it transverses 45 years. And during that period of time, everyone wore hats. but he did not want anyone to wear a hat. There is one other hat in the film, and that's Einstein's, and that is a very specific plot point. But no one was to wear a film. So that was number one. That was number one note, and that actually informed the rest of the design. I love designing menswear. I love designing for men. I've had great opportunity prior to Oppenheimer, but this was yet a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be able to design this film in a way that, knowing how Chris works, in that he rips apart a story to put it back together again. And although the script is very, very, very specific, you are not necessarily, you might not know where the parts are going to wind up. So the second note that he shared was that he did not want to make, in our world building, because this was building this world for Oppenheimer, he didn't want to make it a precious piece, a precious period piece. And what that meant for us was that although we researched the entirety of this film, the entirety of every single character, that he didn't want to feel as if we were documenting something. He wanted it to feel looser. He did not want to have anything stylized in terms of, sometimes when we do the background and so on, we do different kind of organizational methods to achieve a particular kind of look. He was not interested in that. He wanted it to feel as if it was organic. And one of the first and biggest words that were used was feeling, and what it feels like. And the film, on as an overall note, was that what we hoped for was that it would be a seamless movie, that you would not know, you would not have place cards of 1935, 1925, 1945, etc. He wanted to be able to, I call it kind of a sliding doors method, of being able to move all of the characters around in a way that you will follow the story, because you'll follow it through Oppenheimer's eyes. And that you won't be concerned with what period of time, what's the year, where does this take place?
Well, it's interesting because, like, I think like Oppenheimer's like style and the silhouette is unchanged.
What we found first in the research, when we laid out all of Oppenheimer from beginning to end of his life, his silhouette stayed the same. Where it changed was because of his weight. So that happened, and what that achieved, Oppenheimer had a very great style. He was very presentational. He loved fine clothes, fine fabrics, and he was a very stylish fellow. And the way he wore his trousers were a bit more voluminous. The way he wore his jackets were a bit more voluminous. They felt like the period. They weren't preciously specific. The way he wore a three-piece suit was a little bit different than others of the period. He had his own, and that was really one of the most fabulous things of designing for a man who has a particular style, that you have to sculpt his silhouette in a way that will match the sculpting of his face, the sculpting of everything from head to toe, inclusive of his hat that we finally feel. And then when he builds Los Alamos and he comes into his power, he changes.
That's a great scene.
He changes.
That's his like superhero moment.
It was a superhero moment, but that's how men can have a superhero moment. I think that we take for granted, because there isn't a distraction, I would say, of any type of embellishment. We are just talking with sculpture, with form, silhouette, and feel. And what we did was that we changed the fabrication to be a fabrication of a twill and a high twist twill to match into more of a New Mexican type of palette, and give him a bit more strength in a workwear type of way in a two-piece suit. And his superhero look was, of course, topped off by his hat. That
Yeah,
is
what went into that
introduced.
hat? Because it's like a fedora, cowboy brim.
I
with
don't know
high-
that there's a name for it. I don't know
Yeah.
that there was a name for it, but
just the
we
oppie hat.
studied- it's an oppie hat, yes. But I would say that if you took a pork pie hat or a smaller fedora crown, and you added a Western brim, you might get a oppie hat, because it wasn't an urban hat. It wasn't citified in any way. It had a wider brim and a short crown, and it was trimmed in leather. But we had to search quite far for the person who was going to actually make the hat as perfect as we could possibly do. We searched Europe. Somehow or other, the hand of the fabrication didn't match the test that we needed to make when Chris Nolan touched that hat and knew he could shape the brim the way he wanted to shoot the image.
Right.
So Europe didn't work out. We went to New York. New York didn't work out. And we found the perfect hat maker in Mark at Baron Hats in Hollywood, California.
Wow.
He did it perfectly. He was the last one, but he did it perfectly. The color match was exquisite. The hand was beyond sublime. It had absolutely the perfect weight and feel, and matched every photograph that we used for reference. We were so happy. Everybody was happy. And we put it on Killian's head, and it became magic.
That was him. That was the man. Yeah. Now
Yes.
it's iconic. So, well, Ellen, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much
Great
for
to
your
speak
time.
to you.
And we'll see you back in a
Thank
little
you
bit.
very much.
Thank you. Sophie Canale, costume designer for Saltburn. One of the things I love about this film is that it's set in the mid-2000s, and you can definitely see that in the clothes. So how would you describe mid-2000s style?
I think it's definitely mid-2000s England as well. I think,
Yes, true.
there's definitely a Britishness about the fashion, and being able to work with how it's scripted with teenagers, it's college students, university students. So it's really at the kind of height of how their fashion is. And their fashion trends are really, we've got the bootcut jean, we've got the posh boy polo shirt, and it's really how they're styled as well within the fashions of the 2000s, with popping the collar on the guys' shirts.
A lot of polo
also,
shirts.
a lot of polo shirts, a lot of rugby shirts. Yeah, there's the loafer, the deck shoe, and I think that's a trend that still works in kind of the upper class society within within the UK, but I think definitely within the 2000s, the pop collar is an interesting power look, which we put on Felix, who's one of the main characters. But also with the girls as well, there's the teenage girls that are at university. It's looking back at the inspiration from denim skirts to juicy couture polos and
There's a lot of
tracksuits.
accessories from.
It's a lot of accessories. It's the UGG boot. It's the wide belt that had no use apart from sitting on the hips. So it's a fun period, and it's only 16 years ago, but it's so different to the fashions that we wear today. So yeah, it was a challenge to be able to find these items.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what were your discussions with Emerald Fennell like? Because this is, like you said, just 16 years ago, a period we've all lived through. So was this like, I'm assuming this is also something she was going for, having set the film in 2006.
Of course, you know, as working with the genius of Emma Fennell, writer director, she, you know, realism is really important to her, and so, you know, the elements of ripped tights and, you know, the baggiest jeans or the shortest skirts or the bra being popped above the dress line and things like that. Yeah, it was about being able to create the real world of the 2000s. And I personally used a lot of Facebook references. It was such a popular platform at the time. It was so new, and social media, everyone was just putting all their photographs out. It was like no holds bar. It was like every drunken night, every photo went online. So
And
it
you were
was a
always
great
tagged.
Exactly. It was just like, so it was this great, it was incredible though, because I had so much research just out there from my friends and colleagues and things like that of that time that were at university. So Emerald is a huge follower of fashion, and it was great to be able to collaborate with her, with both the high street fashion, and also we worked with a lot of fashion houses within the family of the, and that was a great, be able to get so many archive pieces as well was an unbelievable opportunity. So and with Emerald's connection, she opened so many doors for me to be able to collaborate with so many fashion houses.
I love that Facebook was your mood board, essentially.
It was my mood board for my interviews. So yeah.
I also love that Oliver is kind of like basically in costume the whole time through the movie, because he's, you know, trying to fit in like at Oxford first and then at Saltburn.
Yeah.
He's like ashamed of who he really is. So how did you want to track Oliver's journey like through his clothes that are not really him?
I think Oliver doesn't know where to sit in society. And when we first see him at university, there's an opinion that he perceives, he thinks everyone's going to be smarter and well dressed. He's stepping up into a different, you know, society. So having bought the blazer, having bought the tie, you know, the scarf, you know, the new backpack, it's like first day at school. And then, you know, instantly he gets ridiculed for it. So, and then as we go through the journey, there's a color palette that is quite murky. It's greens and grays, you know, this beginning journey, you know, he sits in the background, and I think that's the closest to his own costumes and own fashion. And then as we move through, the color palette becomes brighter in blues. And also I wanted to, with every element of his costume, I haven't broken them down. I've kept them quite stark. They're straight out of the packet. You know, he's trying to be part of the gang. He's trying to be part of the new tribe. So there's a starkness to his clothing that the whites weren't tacked in comparison to everyone else's, which were broken down to look lived in. Oliver's always slightly awkward, and I wanted to show that in the costume as well.
Yeah, you definitely see that in contrast to Felix, who is obviously well off and rich, but he kind of dresses like a doofus, you know, like
yeah. And
very casual.
Yeah, and even with Oliver, you know, he has the polo shirts. He's slowly morphing into Felix in a way, but also the brands that I use, that, you know, the representation of money that Oliver is always buying from the high street, you know, in comparison to the Tommy Hilfiger, the Gant, the Ralph Lauren, that Felix is so naturally in and relaxed as well. So I wanted to give that difference of wealth through costume.
Well, towards the end of the film, it's in the trailer, and it's one of like the key art pieces too, but Oliver is just in this like wine colored robe, and that color palette is also very important in the film, just like the color red in general. So how did you land on that robe and that material, that particular color?
That robe is actually Felix's robe, so it's like he stepped into Felix's shoes already. So not knowing if anyone's seen the film, so so that's kind of, you know, the inspiration behind that. And colors really you know, the reds were used, but, you know, not as a poignant aspect within that concept of what is happening.
Mm-hmm. At the end, there's also this lavish costume party. And I love both Oliver and Felix's costumes, because Oliver has this, I don't even know what the material is, but this is like white suit and there's embroidery on it. And then
Yeah.
Felix has, he's wearing like a white beater and then angel wings, and Oliver also has like antler ears, or not ears, just antler heads. So what went into those designs?
Well, it was the Midsummer Night's Dream ball, so that's kind of, or birthday party. So the concept started with that, with Oliver as the changeling boy. So that's where the concept with his costume started, and then looking at British folklores and folk costumes, and coming across this really beautiful decoration of suits with leaves and the decoration. And I feel like Elspeth would have really dressed Oliver for his own birthday party. You know, she would want him to look, you know, the finest he could. So it's a cotton drill and denim mix suit. And then working with actually my sister-in-law, Alice Canale, we collaborated, and she illustrated the oak leaves and the acorns, and there's also some moths that are hidden within that embroidery, and the symbolism of that is really that the acorn and the oak leaf, a lot in military, is inspired by victory and power. So there's a twist in the tale as Oliver has that scene, and so I wanted to have that kind of Easter egg in there within his costume, and also the moth to the flame, which, you know, Oliver is. So we have that, and also with talking to Emerald and the way he moves through the maze in those scenes, that we really wanted like this really strong silhouette, and that's where the antlers came in, just to be able to kind of really create that powerful look.
Yeah.
So
sure.
and then again, in Felix's way, he's constantly just so relaxed and but effortlessly cool.
Also like kind of innocent. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's just I also believe at that point in the storyline, he's really disregarded Oliver, and it's Oliver's birthday and he's not there to celebrate it. So the relaxedness of his costume in comparison to everyone else's is due to, you know, not wanting to pay any effort towards this so-called friend who's been lying to him.
Yeah. Well, Sophie, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. You get to stay on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to our Meet the Experts film costume design panel. Today, we're joined by Jacqueline West from Killers of the Flower Moon, Mark Bridges from Maestro, Janty Yates and David Crossman from Napoleon, Ellen Mirojnick from Oppenheimer, and Sophie Canale from Saltburn. Thank you all for being here. I want to start by going back to the beginnings of your careers. What was your first job in costuming, and what did you learn from it? Jacqueline?
My first job was Henry and June with Phil Kaufman, and I was in Paris at the Pret-a-Porter showing my fashion collection, and got a call from my store that Phil was in Paris and shooting Henry and June and wanted to meet with me because he said he felt he needed me on that movie. And so that night I met with him and his wife at a restaurant called Bauta near the opera, and she kept saying, "Ask her, Phil, ask her." And he said, "Would you come and work on this movie with me?" And I said, "Well, I've never done that." And he said, "Well, you can." He said, "And I think you'd be really good." But I wasn't, you know, I'd never done anything like that. And so it was definitely a learning curve. I learned so much, but he gave me, you know, millions of French francs and a driver. And I went around and started shopping at the Marché Malik and at Clignancourt. And then he said, "Will you do her house in Lucien. And he said, I want it to look like your house in Berkeley. She was eclectic. She shopped at the flea markets like you do. And he said, and you've met Anna East Nin. He said, you've read everything she's ever written. I feel you know her better than anybody I have here. So come work with me. And
You believed in you so much. So, Ellen, how about you?
I first started as a fashion designer, and at the point of about 8 years in, my husband was working on a film in New Orleans, and it was a period film. It was called The French Quarter, and I went to visit. I was kind of bored doing fashion, and they didn't have a costume designer, and they asked if I would do it. I also had never done anything before. It took place in, I think it was 1912, and it was a low budget film. It starred a number of people from the golden age of Hollywood. It was a bit racy. It took place in a house of prostitution and in the French Quarter. And it was the biggest challenge of my life. And I had to figure out, where is everything going to come from? Coming from fashion, it was very easy for me to have things made and quickly and so on. But I needed to have a whole stock of clothes. And there was a company in New York called Brooks Van Horn at that time. And I was given a reference, and they were quite helpful. And I came back to New Orleans with a ton of stuff and learned what movie making was about. I was the wardrobe person. And that was a bit of a problem because I didn't sew too well. And I didn't really know anything, but I jumped in the water all in, and it was the beginning of costume design.
How are you at sewing now?
Terrible.
Still.
No one ever asks me to sew.
Some things just don't change. It's okay.
They don't change. They really don't change.
David, how about you?
Oh, I left school in a kind of fit of boredom, and went to work in a costume house. It was a famous costume house at the time called Berman's and Nathan's. So I learned my kind of trade there. And when I left there, eventually, the first film I did was Saving Private Ryan, because I'd met Joanna Johnston whilst working there. So she had landed this big project at the time, and so got to do that. That's one of my first full films.
One of my favorite films. So, Janty, how about you?
Well, the first feature I did was Jean-Jacques Hano's Quest for Fire, and that was as a complete junior. We'd spent 6 months destroying, I hate to say this, fur, Hudson Bay, thank you so much. Jean-Jacques wanted all these pristine furs, totally uncured, to look uncured. So me and 6 Wimbledon art students just had the best fun destroying and chamfering the edges and throwing on latex for, not albumin, that's eggs, but for that sort of disgusting finish. And then the first real HOD job I ever got was a small English film with a budget of £6,000, which is about, I suppose, $8,000 and 8,000 euros, I'm not sure. And I did it. Charity shops or op shops. No, what do you call them in America? But, we did it. We did it. And I came in with not a profit, but came in under budget, amazingly.
People always like that, so.
Exactly.
Mark, how about you?
It's always hard to answer this question because I worked sort of as an assistant costume designer for a while for a designer named Richard Hornung, and at the same time I was doing my own small straight to video projects. So, but I suppose my first film of any note would have been Paul Thomas Anderson's first film, Hard Eight, and we had a very small budget too. We had like $10,000, and there was me and one other person, and we hired somebody in Reno where we were going to shoot. It's a miracle I even got that job, because I had met with Paul. We decided this was great, but he wanted to see some of my work, and I had done a small film for Chanticleer Films. I thought I knew where it was screening. I took him there to the DGA, and it was completely black. And so I had screwed up. This was in 1995, so you couldn't look at your phone and double check the email, you know. And he said, maybe it's at the Writers Guild. So we hopped in the car, went to the Writers Guild. It was in fact showing there, and we walked right in when it was coming on. And I got hired for the job because he liked what I had done with outerwear, and we were going to be shooting in Reno at night in January. So I got that job just by sheer luck and Paul's fast thinking, actually. So I would think it was that, and then we've gone on to do 9 other films together.
Mm-hmm. Now, who cares if you gave him the wrong address? So
well, if you lost the piece of paper back in those days, you were
I know you're screwed. You can't. Yeah. Sophie?
So I did a degree in costume for screen and stage when I was 18. So that was the direction I really wanted to go in. And I then moved to London. I had an opportunity to, I was sleeping on people's sofas, and I went and worked on a Sally Potter film, Rage. And, it was a, work experience, and, every day a different actor was coming in. It was Dame Judi Dench, it was Eddie Izzard, it was Jude Law, it was Lily Cole. And I was like, what am I working? It was a great opportunity. And then I went on to work with, throughout the costume industry, in the department, from a trainee to assistant to breakdown artist, coordinator, trying all different roles. And I've been very fortunate to assist both Janty and Ellen as assistant designer, in Janty in Cape Town and Ellen on Bridgerton. So I've had a very fortunate journey and worked with some amazing costume designers. And this is my first film. So it's nice to hear all your stories, because I'm very excited to be in such amazing company.
And you knocked it out of the park, so it's
Thank you.
Well, color schemes, kind of, I mean, they depend on the story and the character, of course, but what are some of your favorite colors to work with? Ellen?
Well, I kind of run the gamut. Because I love color. I absolutely love color, but I love contrast, black and white as well. And so it really depends on the project. I've been fortunate to be able to use the full spectrum of color. And I really, really, I think that it really depends on the project that I'm working on. In my life, I only wear black, but I love color. And there's color in my house. There's color when I paint. There's color in everything I'm attracted to. However, I'm restrained in working in film. And but I am a huge fan of black and white.
Black is just so easy to wear, and you don't really need to think about it. So
True. But I love in working with black and white, and working with the contrast, the yin and yang and the silhouette is something that I just adore it.
Yeah, it's very striking, especially on film when you see it. Jacqueline?
Well, it always depends for me on the director I'm working with. I too wear a lot of black, and I'm obsessed by black and white photography.
We have a lot of black here, just everybody right now.
Black and white photography, black and white films, all of that is, fabulous for me. But I've worked with Terrence Malick a lot, and Terry doesn't like color. He doesn't like anything that distracts from the glow of the face. So all of the clothes have to be dark and the face has to shine. And then Chivo, who shoots most of his movies, hates white. And if I use any, even off-white, Jackie, you're killing me. You're killing me. No, white is the enemy of the movie. So I don't even get to use black and white contrast on those films. Then I've done a lot of, movies involving Native Americans, and those are all natural colors. I mean, The Revenant was all fur, so you're limited, to the colors that animals come in. And so I also
you have to use those now.
I also paint. I use a lot of color in my paintings and a lot of contrast, but I don't really have favorite colors. I'm like Henry Ford. I like any color as long as it's black.
Janty?
I love gold.
Mhm.
I just love it. And I've had the opportunity to absolutely throw it at every female costume that I've done with Ridley over the last 10 or 15 years. Embroidery, gold bullion, glorious, absolutely glorious, and for men as well, in actual fact. I also love rich, dark, deep jewel colors, deep burgundy velvets, deep green, gorgeous electric blues in those sort of tones in a velvety fabric. I'm mad about those, but I go where the film takes me, and it could be easily black and white, or all black, or all white. I'm led like a will-o'-the-wisp in the wind.
Yeah.
So we all
yeah, I think definitely it's in my small experience it's what the director really loves and their tones, and at the moment I'm working on a project that I've never used so much lilac in my life, and I've even started buying lilac myself, which I never thought I would. So it's definitely a direction that how working with DOPs and directors and what they want, and how that works with the characters. But I think colors really importantly tonally to create a mood in a scene as well. So, and I think that's really key and important to be able to branch out with bright colors for emotion and then pull back for darker scenes. So yeah, I think it lends to the mood of where you're going.
David?
As everybody says, it's the context of what you're doing. On a couple of the Star Wars films, we used a lot of whites and yellows and reds, which was a nice thing to do, but really, khaki's always been quite good for me.
Mark, how about you?
It's great to have fun with color. I usually have some kind of a plan, whether it's a film that takes place in a lot of different locations. I'll try to do palettes for each place so that it kind of helps you understand the story. I find myself using green a lot as a neutral. Or really to say things. I think I'd pick colors a lot for emotional reasons of what's going on in the scene, or just to have fun. We were in a fabric store in Italy looking for fabric for a very rich woman in Phantom Thread, and I found this incredible green taffeta, and I thought, well, green for money bags, and it worked out perfectly. So things like that, you want to have a little fun with it. But you're not working in a vacuum. You're working with a director and a DP, and certainly a complexion of an actress as well. So there are a lot of things that go into it, but I like to have fun when I can.
Yeah, green as a neutral. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, because they're like money color, like green.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great
green,
neutral.
they can kind of go away in a weird, strange
dark green, yeah.
But even like gray greens and
Gray
things.
green is a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, calming.
I just a black and white experience that I have to share with all of you.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
infrared photography. Everything was supposed to be black on a project, and infrared picks up a lot of black as white. But you don't know it until you put it in front of the camera. So you have to test everything ahead of time because I costumed a whole scene in black and half of it was white. And I had to go back and remake it. So be careful.
This is a PSA for all costume designers, aspiring costume designers. Infrared, beware. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap, but it was so great speaking with all of you. Congratulations on all of your projects, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Lovely to see you all.
Bye.
everybody.